And Michelle, thank you so much for sending a little bit more of clarification on what you're reporting on. That helps us. And then also the recording from Alec was also helpful to give us a little bit of insight. But yeah, I know that Faves has prepared a few things, both from some things related to the Sales Cloud and efficiencies to be gained there. But I think more of a kind of a harbor cruise of our Service Cloud offering, which I think would be of interest to you all. So Fabes, I'll let you take it away if you're ready.
Great. Thanks, Cheryl. Michelle, good to see you again. Thank you again for all that great content that you sent us. There were two things that I captured, and based off of the two recordings that I gathered from your colleague, we talked a lot about optimizing the way that you're managing this concept of like requests that are coming in, right? The structure that you have for the accounts that you have right now and the context related to those accounts, I think that's great. And I think that's still something you can continue with. But what I wanted to show you today is how you can leverage, what you're working within in a system that's more optimized to support that model specifically. What I mean by that is I'm going to show you what we call Service Cloud. And this typically is often managed for payment companies, fintechs that do payment processing, platforms like yours where you're doing consolidation of, let's say, debt or any sort of disputes that are occurring. I know you had two different use cases where, let's say, one is a general, individual request, or another one can be a lessee is, disputing a outstanding balance with, for example, we're going to use Graystar today just because they're my landlord. But the reason I want to bring that up is just to show you that there's a better way to optimize this concept of like a ticket, right? So what I'm showing you today, Service Cloud, and what we're going to walk through is the role of a service agent operating within Service Cloud and how they manage that, okay? You use Dialpad right now, and I think one thing that I did want to denote is that your colleague sent a video and a couple tips or comments that I have, and I'm happy to send this to you later as well, is it looked like Ring Central was still installed in Salesforce. So it was one of those things where my recommendation on that front is just to make sure that you have the right dialer set up in the org. And I'm happy to send you, context of what I mean. There's some screenshots that I could send you. But essentially what I saw is Ring Central in there when you had told us that you use Dialpad. So I think my recommendation there is, if you are not on Salesforce integrating to Dialpad yet, definitely get on that so that you can get them integrated into the proper setups. Remove Ring Central if that's something that you're not even using anymore, to then further clean up the org per se, so that makes a better experience for your agents and individual people that are working on these accounts that they work with. Okay.
Great. Thank you.
Of course, that's the first thing. Now, in a world where we have kind of that Dialpad integration flowing in directly to Salesforce, you would have this phone pop up here, this phone Dialpad sit natively inside of the Salesforce platform. And the reason why I show this to you is because this is going to tie into our use case around best practices. So when we first talked to you, you said, we don't know what we don't know, right? And we'd love to understand from our perspective what we typically see. Now, from our perspective, what we see a lot of is we see the dialer sit innately in the CRM so that individuals can call outbound, receive calls, and then also even receive voicemails that go in and directly are tied to the contacts that we're working with, okay? So that's the context around the dialer and Dialpad specifically and how that ties to Service Cloud Voice, which is what I'm about to cover. Now, to go through this initially, what I just popped up here is what we call Omni-Channel. And think about Omni-Channel as the bucket in which all these requests come in, right? Omni-Channel supports 5 different channels of engagement, whether it's an email request, it's a phone call, it can be even a text or a chat, or it can even be a chatbot that's embedded inside of your website. So if you have an individual that goes in and has a login, they can initiate a case with an agent right from their login and subsequently open a case that we're going to be taking in today. Okay, so Omni-Channel is a very powerful tool that sits inside of Service Cloud that supports all those 5 different channels of engagement. Down the road, a more comprehensive and complex solution is something like what we call Service Cloud Voice that helps support like automated case queues and round robin phone call answering and things like that. But my recommendation is we start here at the basics to make sure that you have the proper channels to accommodate those requests that are coming in. And not only that, but manage it in a way that's effective for everybody that's taking these calls, okay? So that's what Omni-Channel does. In this use case, if I assume the role of a service agent, let's assume I got a phone call that comes in, right? And we're gonna be talking about our use case in a little bit, but I wanna show you from a homepage perspective, from a service agent. With Service Cloud, I have the opportunity to see KPIs, which you might be familiar with. You've got your basic dashboard that tracks your cases by channel. So if you open up email versus what's outstanding from phone, you can start to see the flow of traffic from each respective channel of engagement. I also have things like my case priorities. So for example, if there's a Greystar dispute that is a very high priority versus a low one, those can start to get funneled into buckets of seeing, okay, this is our volume versus these are the ones that matter a little bit less. And I'll show you how a little bit later from a service perspective, this rolls up to the C-suite so that they can see the full state of the business as well, okay? One thing that might matter to you specifically, and as I watch this demo, or as I watch the recording, cases by type. So you can begin to segment out the case request by type. So if it's just a general account question or account request from one of your contacts versus someone disputing an outstanding balance, right? You can start to segment out those case types to start to create a little funnel of like where you are in terms of the response times, in terms of the case types that are being managed. And you can start to see the volume of what's coming in the most as, right? So in the report that we got that you showed us in that little grid, it was very like count based, right? So it's just numbers. But right here, what we're doing and the value we're creating out of this is the visualization of these charts, right? We're now able to see at a quick glance, like, oh, wow, we've got a lot of, for example, product requests, right? So we now know that there's a high volume there and we need to address that at some point, okay? This whole bottom section typically is what we call the case or the KPIs for case resolution, SLA compliance. And this ties directly to service agents often because it's showing you the effectiveness of your team, right? Not only are you able to see what's outstanding or what needs to be accomplished, but also how effective are you being if you, for example, you have an SLA with Greystar or any other company where you have to get these disputes solved quickly. It's letting you know that you are behind or ahead of the expected SLA. So really the value we're creating out of this is that from a service agent, I can log in here and see all the things that matter to me right away, as well as, for example, my team's bandwidth. So if I'm looking at my team's cases, I can then begin to interpret, okay, this is what matters to me. This is why we need to address these issues right away. And this is a good way to show that bar chart of this is what the bandwidth looks like across the team. Okay. Awesome. So now let's get into the actual case management. I showed you the dashboard. We also have this concept of a service insights and alerts. So you can get automation built out where if there's a specific account that you work with or a contact that submits a request via email, you could have an alert pop up saying, hey, this email or this request just came in. And it could actually route that to an appropriate case for you to work on right away. So you can actually act upon these notifications right away from the home screen too. So it's a very powerful tool that we see people use within Service Cloud. All right. So now in the use case, let's say someone called or someone sent an email, right? Because I know that you work often with emails. Someone sent an email disputing a outstanding claim that has to do on a past due account. You're going to see Victor Staub here, who was a tenant with the Greystar property, and essentially is disputing the fact that we have an outstanding balance on his account. You'll notice there's a lot going on here, so don't be worried about that. That can be configured to be as simple as you want or as complex as you want. But the big thing I wanted to show you is in the past with the task mechanism that you had kind of tasks that you're creating within subtasks and then the activity types and the types within that, right? What we're doing now here is we're creating stages or statuses of each respective case that is being worked. So when a request comes in via email, you could have that flow in via email. Someone takes that in and then puts that into Marcus' current status of attention. What we mean by that is you're now marking this is the stage that you are at. You're not bound to just seeing what we call this path here. You can rename each of these respective stages to whatever you want, but oftentimes we see new, received, working, closed, right? And you notice there's even an escalation option so that if I feel like I need support, I can click on this and it can launch a workflow for my managers to get involved as well to help consolidate or solve this case as well. One thing I didn't have time to get to, and we'll talk about a little bit, is this concept of your payment information. That can flow directly into these cases too for you to visualize and understand. We know we're working with Victor, right? Because that's the related contact that I see within this case that I'm working on. And we also know what case number that we're actually working on as well. So the value that we're creating out of here is that we're going to give, instead of someone going to the task section and checking off tasks, we're giving the agent and empowering them or the account manager the ability to take in a case, work on a ticket, and then subsequently close it, and rely on the fact that everything that we do here is being tracked automatically for this respective ticket that's being opened, right? So for example, Victor talked to us, about the issues. We know that we need to have a back and forth conversation. You'll notice I also have the ability to email Victor straight from this console too. And I could even import things like templates, right? And this is just a sample template that we can drop in, but it can be something as simple as, thanks for reaching out to us. We'll get back to you on your request. We know that there's an outstanding balance, and this is all being saved. And you notice I actually did this yesterday night, but I just put in a quick template here of, we're writing to inform you that you have an outstanding balance with property management company. And this is obviously a template that you import, right? So what we're doing here is this whole concept of, and this ties to the second video that I saw, this whole concept of BCCing every time. This removes that whole load and that whole lift, because you're now BCCing automatically, right? You don't need to worry about BCCs because this is all being automatically tracked. If you notice, we're still in this case. I'm still this agent working within the same interface, and I have the ability to see who the contact is that I'm working with, the interactions that I've had with that individual contact, and then any other past cases that have happened with this particular account that we work with. Okay, so you'll notice here there's a gray star, request that maybe have come in the past, and that's all being consolidated, and it's giving me more ability to visualize all this stuff.
When it comes to replying, I love the email templates because we do communicate with consumers via email, but it's going to be templated because we don't really want to put anything in writing as our responses. It opens up to liability. Is there a way for this to be sent from a non-specific email? For example, we usually will send consumers documentation from either a do not reply or an admin or clients that's shared amongst multiple people. Is that something that can be set up on the back end for the users?
Absolutely.
So that they're not sending from the personal inbox.
Yeah, absolutely. You can set up auto replies and have it templated to your font, your categorizations for the style that you want. And the first action that could actually happen even before this is open can be an auto response reply saying, thank you for submitting your case. An agent will reach out to you, or an account manager will reach out to you. And that's a very standard practice. We do that all the time. And there's a multitude of ways that you can launch that. But for the sake of the example, I just wanted to show you how this can sit inside of what we're working on. And another key thing too, Michelle, is that you can actually embed knowledge articles. If there's something that often pops up, you can link a knowledge article to one of your email responses. So to get more in the spirit of auto responding and creating better content catered towards, let's say someone forgot their password on their Graystar account. It's like how to reset your password. You can link that article to this account or to this response, and then subsequently send that reply out. Okay, perfect. So it's a very, very common tool, very popular. And yeah, this is kind of the interface of what a service agent typically would deal with, right? The hope is to be able to close this out, and then you move on with the next request that comes in. And this Omni-Channel, actually, if it was populated with information, you could have a little funnel. You could have a queue almost of cases that you need to work on. So you're going one by one, checking these things off, marking them as complete, and going forward with each respective case. Okay.
I wanted to ask Michelle, so what Fabian pointed out on the knowledge articles, just serving up the content that's relevant to the typical case type. If what's your current process right now for agents that are either maybe a little bit new or there's like a new case type? How do they find the relevant information to help these clients? What's the process look like?
So there's going to be two different channels for that, right? We have our client services workers who communicate with clients directly. They do have form templates that they'll use. A lot of times when they're requesting documents, they might have copy paste. I think they would definitely utilize those Einstein recommendations, and we could populate those pretty easily for them for things like password resets, document requests, additional document requests, kind of what I was referencing. Those would be definitely useful. The other channel would be our compliance workers, which we're communicating with the consumers in that case, right? Client services works with the clients, the properties. The compliance departments are working with consumers directly. They do not communicate with consumers. In fact, they're just attaching documentation. We might template things like our proof letters, like here's a copy of your documentation explaining the charges we validated it with our client, etc. So we might find use with the knowledge base for templated letters that we have in our database that we'll usually embed into the email and then attach PDF documentation to send to the consumer.
Got it. And also mention here that the knowledge base, there's two sides, right? One is for your client or consumer facing material that you would send to them, but then there's also for an internal knowledge base where, it's more so like an agent's like, well, what do I do in this scenario? And that's more of like an internal FAQ on policies or the right procedures to follow in a certain scenario.
And I think a certain number of people at our office would benefit from that as well. Training is something that we do constantly. So having a quick reference to training documents on how to handle certain things would be beneficial. Especially
since you noted how, from like a compliance standpoint, like you need that consistency, especially if something's going to be in writing, that you adhere to certain standards. So that would make sense there.
Perfect.
Great. Yeah, and thanks for marking that, Cheryl. One thing I wanted to wrap this up with too, Michelle, is this concept of, there's a concept of accountability that goes with this too, right? Is that you're not only working on the tickets and we're not only closing them out, hopefully, is I wanted to, focus your attention on what we call milestones. And milestones essentially are tied directly to the respective cases that they're worked on, because they actually show any outstanding things that need to be completed by a specific date, right? Now, service agents might not be a fan of this because if they're behind, it's going to mark it as behind, and that subsequently rolls up to management, and they see that. But from an account manager perspective, you can notice I can leverage milestones as an agent here to understand, hey, in this case, I'm 11 months overdue on this particular request. I need to get going on closing this out. And the value that we create out of these milestones and the concept is that, again, we've created this central source of truth for interacting with the individual on the other end, but we also have the opportunity to see where we're at in terms of a metric that matters to us, right? Knowing that I'm out behind on these milestones, knowing that maybe I need to get more support, I can go ahead and escalate this to my manager to then process that through and help me finish this case out. So, in the past where you were going through tasks and lists around those tasks, you have way more visibility here and understanding. The tasks do a great job of letting you know when something is due, but it doesn't let you know how behind you are, right? So the value that we create with the Service Cloud system is that it's creating one central view for the agent to work on, milestones letting them know if they're either behind or ahead or whatever they need to do, as well as the ability to auto capture this BCC concept that you've been frequently working on in your requests and automatically tie those responses and interactions with those clients. So you notice here, all the conversations that have been had are being logged automatically to the case itself. So if we close this out for compliance reasons and someone needs to come back, all we would do is come to this case and see exactly what was discussed during the case.
Great. And one question I wrote down while you were talking is the current status. I know in my email reply yesterday we had talked about status as kind of drive our work efforts with our management system. Is that, if we were able to build a wedge and we can designate those steps, is that something that we can do a push-pull? Because we will progress through an ADN, which I described as additional docs needed. We're going to go through that 3 times with 3 requests for our clients. So we're going to push that forward each time, manually updating our work cards in our system. But if we could integrate and have that progress through and update our account with our efforts, that would be something that would be really beneficial for us as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. And you can do that with an open API, meaning the bidirectional sync can dictate when this changes. So you can get to a point, I know you mentioned manual, because that's maybe the way you do it right now, but you can get to a point where you can fully automate that. And we see that all the time with payment systems where, something gets populated on the other end, it feeds that info in and then moves and progresses the stage. So we have a very powerful automation system called Flow Builder, and Flow Builder is contingent on records changing, and you can build that criteria based off of those changes. So totally something we see and totally something we can support.
Great.
Okay.
I had a quick question for the two of you, actually. When we're thinking the report that you showed with the additional documents needed, so am I understanding correctly that your system of record is indicating that this particular account has additional documents needed, and how do you receive that notification?
So currently, as we bring in our files, the workers that import the accounts, when they create them, they will change the status internally to that ADN. On a weekly basis, we have a sales call where we're going to pull status reports and pull the number of accounts that are sitting in that bucket. And that's what we present to our staff on a weekly. We've got this many accounts sitting in ADN 1, 2, 3. We've got these that are 30 days overdue. And, Salesforce is utilized for some of those things. I don't know if we shared all the data, but, email communications and telephone calls are also tracked, but I know they're not being tracked accurately. So to see the Omni-Channel is kind of like something that'll help us really kind of keep track of those communications in our KPIs. But currently it is a filter. We run an inventory on accounts that are sitting in that status, and that's what populates that report. And it's a manual thing.
And then how are those assigned out then to your workforce? Like, with the variety of accounts that have additional documentation needed, how do you guys disseminate that to have someone start working on that?
It's based on the client. So each of our representatives works in a specific grouping of people. For example, I've got one worker who works directly with with Greystar. I've got one employee that only works Greystar accounts. They're the point of contact for Greystar. So anything that appears as a client that is Greystar that is his responsibility to deal with the ADNs. I've got other clients that are Washington specific. I've got ones that deal with another third party, and then others that deal with specific management companies as well. So it really is based on the client, which is something that I know Salesforce, we are currently tracking with our client database.
Excellent, because there is, and Fabes could definitely add more color here, because we've talked about how cases can be initiated via like an email request that comes in, but there could be a world in which there is some automation built in where there's additional documents needed for this particular account, and then it's just automatically opening up a case and assigning it to the account owner to give them the list of things that they need to do related.
And if we could auto push emails, that'd be great too, because that's a lot of what it is. You know, when it gets to a certain point, we want to make a phone call. So maybe we get an alert when a phone call needs to be made after the first step is missed or hit or not hit, progresses to step number 2. Then we pick up the phone and make a phone call along with that. So I really do think that integration and ability of Salesforce to kind of track that for us will take a lot of the extra legwork out of maybe missing some files. That'd be good.
Yeah, not only just missing things, but just the duplicative effort, right? And so there's a lot of efficiency to be gained, and you know, more accuracy as well.
Yeah.
Great. So the last thing I just wanted to show here, Michelle, was tying this back to the reports that you sent us, or the grid of the information that we're having here. This is really, as you take a step back, this is a 50,000 foot view of the business, right? So we talked a little bit about from the homepage what it looks like from a service agent and that experience and the metrics that they can track. But from a service executive level, you want to also be able to see that at the state of the business, right? So what we're looking at here now is, if I assume that role of a C-level, manager, I'm now able to interpret again those KPIs that aren't at the individual level, they're at the business level overall. Yeah. So we can look at things like, first contact resolution, escalation rates, cases assigned by status, again, tying it back to the bandwidth of the team, right? And then any open cases by priority or the cases by channel. So let's say Dialpad cases are coming in, there's way more Dialpad calls coming in versus emails that are being launched. From the management level, you're like, okay, do we need to optimize the way we're managing those requests? Or do we need just to build better automation around that, right? How do we balance that out to create a better system for everybody internally? And I can also leverage things like, cases by type, by agent. So you're segmenting out not only the cases, but also the team too. And then other metrics and this one is really also really important because this is what you kind of do right now, but it's the activities by representative, right? So you can start to track, when is someone working on a case? How many cases are they working on? When's the frequency of those cases, accounts and the management of that? So really what this is intended for is to show you that there's a multitude of ways that you can visualize that data. And let's get you off that report or the Excel sheet that shows the record count and actually give you something for your manager and your kind of C-suite level execs to understand and interpret, where they can even just get an email of this every day, right? Every day, every week, every month. And they would just have to subscribe to this report. Instead of having to build a report, send it out, or share it accordingly, you now have the ability to not only see this information, but you can also understand, show me all email related cases, and this information can change dynamically based off of those requests that you're filtering out for. Yeah. Right. And let's say we want to do all, and instead of just all types, let's equal it to one specific individual. Right. We can now modify these grids and these dashboards to accommodate the views that they're looking to see. And again, it's really empowering you to have that data in front of you rather than just creating that, grid and report externally.
Great.
All right. Yeah, that was pretty much all I had to show you today. I know we kind of breezed through that, but really fundamentally Service Cloud is a very common use case that we see for this. And the main goal really is the Omni-Channel, right? The routing of those specific request types, building the automation behind the requests that come in. So things like auto replies, email to case, meaning that someone sends that email and creates a case, managing files better, creating a more comprehensive transcript of these conversations, and then tying that to the cases themselves that are being worked on. And then we talked a little bit about, the executive level dashboards, highlighting those activities, key metrics that matter to the business. And obviously these can be modified to whatever you want to see. So these are all reports that you can interact with. And I think this will be a better state than where you are right now from a setup perspective. And we're happy to help you out there.
Great. Oh, I like it.
Yeah, Michelle, I think it goes without saying that these reports on the dashboard that Fabes is showing here, it's completely customizable to exactly what you want to report on. So all the dashboards are just pulling from the underlying reports that are very customizable. But I know that there's probably some thoughts going through your head as to how do we get from where we are now to something like this, right? And so the expectation, of course, is not that you do this on your own, right? I think, and we alluded to this in a previous conversation, is that we would set you up with a partner that would help you, articulate what you, essentially, Fabian is just taking some of the inputs from, the recordings and the conversations we've had to show you just something, pretty high level. But then how do we implement something like this for Genesis, given that you already have Sales Cloud, but it's not really meeting your needs? It hasn't been set up in the way that it's really suiting your needs. And then now we're talking about Service Cloud. How do we implement something like this in the right way from the beginning? And so, I would want to introduce you to a partner that would work maybe from a project base or from like a bucket of hours, whatever works for your budget, to not only maybe address the Sales Cloud side and maybe revisit how that's set up, and then set up Service Cloud for your needs.
Okay. And that's what I figured, based on our previous conversation, you had mentioned that, and that was something I think we were anticipating too, is, we do have our own internal IT, but they're specialized in our services, not yours. So that makes
Definitely.
sense.
And there would be conversations to be had with them about how things should be set up. And then, the huge component, though, is integration with your system of record, because right now, what we want to move away from is the manual entry on both sides and that kind of thing. So I think that would be a huge component. And then, of course, a partner can help you with that.
Perfect. Well, good. So what we can do as far as next steps then and takeaways, I definitely want to get this video over to Tammy and Bill. I know she does want to see it, and she wishes she could have seen it, because I know she really loves engaging with you guys. And Bill, I really do think that he would benefit from seeing kind of the reporting aspect. It would take a lot of the labor away from him on a weekend in preparation for a Monday meeting, just to be able to pull up a dashboard and kind of see live stats right there with everybody. Our sales team would still probably use this, and I'm sure we can think of features that our sales department would use these reporting items for, because even though they wouldn't be, receiving as many tickets as, say, client services would, they're still doing a lot of outreach to potential clients and onboarding those sorts of contracts and next steps.
And, actually, you touch upon that in Alex's recording. He mentioned something about how it would be nice for him to be able to differentiate between prospects and current clients, right? So that is something that we can help you differentiate in your current setup. And so I can send some help there. But to be clear, there is a world in which Genesis has both Sales Cloud, which you already own, and Service Cloud. So you license based on the responsibility of the person, right? So there's, your sales team is going to be using Sales Cloud, your service team will be using Service Cloud, but it's all built upon the same repository of information. It's just different. It's just a different experience depending on your role. And so, we can retain what you have on Sales Cloud side, and then, add Service Cloud for folks that would use that kind of functionality.
Perfect. Good to know.
Yeah.
Good. I would like to find out information on how to get Ring Central off of there and get Dialpad on, though.
Yep.
I think that's something that even just a baseline help to help track some of the work that's being done, because I do know that phone calls are something that we're trying to ramp up, and it's not accurately capturing currently, and we've been looking at trying to figure out how to fix that.
Yeah, so let me send you this really quick here. I don't know who the admin is, but essentially what you have to do is uninstall an app, right? Because everything in Salesforce that's linked via an integration is called an app. So think about like your phone, you download apps on your phone. Ring Central is an app that's installed into the org that you have, right? And it can be uninstalled. So what I just sent you is the directions for uninstalling an app. And you just have to go to sorry, that's the wrong app, or that's the wrong link. Sorry.
And Faves, you can just Slack them to me, and I will send Michelle a follow-up.
Okay, perfect. Cool. Yeah, I'll cite those over to Cheryl, and we can get that over to you, Michelle. But it's a very common use case. In theory, you uninstall everything that Ring Central is associated to the org. It goes away, and then you install something like Dialpad to be the one that's actually bringing you in information that you need.
Perfect. Thank you. That's much appreciated.
No problem.
Good.
All right.
I'm just recording.